The complex in California looked as well guarded as a nuclear weapons depot from the outside. Black guard towers rose up like the heads of vipers from the gently rolling hills and misty vine country. Roll after roll of razor wire surrounded the no-man's land between tall electrified fences that disappeared far off in the distance, thousands of feet away. The async complex must have cost many billions of dollars to construct, and they certainly had the highest level of security for all their operations. I had gotten a high security clearance from my previous work on physics with the Department of Energy. I had a PhD in quantum physics and extensive experience working with ion colliders. When my contract with the DOE had expired, async agents had been there with a contract in hand, offering me 3 times what I made as a government servant. This work is, however, highly dangerous, the man in the black suit sitting across from me said, his flat, dark eyes looking cold and predatory. He gave me the creeps. And it is highly classified. If you ever tell anyone, you will be violating federal law. I looked down at the contract, seeing the numbers flashing across the paper, over $300,000 a year. I gave the creepy async agent a fake smile and shook his hand. "You have a deal," I said, grinning, and feeling hopeful for the first time in a long time. I pulled up to the gate, where a man in a black, militaristic uniform carrying an automatic rifle took my credentials and identification. He looked me carefully up and down before motioning me on with a wave of his hand. A young woman with an eager expression on her tanned face waited for me near the front entrance. As I walked through the packed parking lot, I saw many expensive Ferraris and Porsches among them. The front wall was a fortress of metal and concrete. The entrance to the compound itself looked like a door for a doomsday bunker. It was made of thick steel and separated horizontally in the middle, slowly rising up and down with the whirring of many hidden gears. "This is your first day, huh?" Emily said, giving me a crooked half-smile. Her dark eyes seemed to find some amusement in this, though I didn't know why. "You're going to see sights, my friend. There are things in this place that are beyond any of us to understand or control. I'm Emily, by the way." I nodded, feeling nervous. "I'm Al, but you probably already know that from reading my file. They haven't debriefed me on what is contained here yet," I said. "I know it has to do with ion collisions and the ALICE program, though." She laughed at that. "Oh, I guess it does in a roundabout way," Emily said, "but that's really only a means to an end. The first few experiments were total failures. We had to increase the intensity of the magnetic distortion over 100-fold, and then," she shook her head grimly. "Well, they'll debrief you on it, but they think it caused a massive earthquake after we adjusted the power upwards. It caused a fire and a meltdown in the laboratory, too. But after the team had extinguished all the flames and started to examine the threshold of the magnetic propulsion system, there was something in it. An obstruction, I guess you could call it." Her eyes glittered at this. It was a hallway, an empty, yellow hallway with flickering fluorescent lights and soaking wet carpets. And it led into somewhere endless, a truly massive and ineffable place. But why am I telling you? You'll see it for yourself before the day is over. After all, everyone must enter the backrooms on their first day. It's part of the initiation, I guess you could say. Her crooked smile looked almost predatory as we walked through the metal door into a massive hallway of smooth concrete. A row of brand new elevators stood open, waiting to take us down into the bowels of the complex. Emily pressed the button marked A space, at the very bottom of a long list of numbers. We were on the ground floor, then there were 20 floors below that, followed by the A space floor. There was a smell like ozone and chemicals in the air as the elevator doors swung open. I saw an enormous chamber 50 feet high and the size of a football stadium. It had pure steel ceilings, walls, and floors. At the far end of the chamber, hundreds of lasers and ion colliders were pointed around a small open door. Through that door, I saw a hallway stretching out as far as the eye could see, a hallway with flickering fluorescent lights and piss-colored walls. There was a wet, infected smell radiating out of the halls. "What's that smell?" I said, wrinkling my nose. Emily laughed. "Spinal fluid," she said. "It's soaked into all the carpets of the back rooms." I looked at her as if she was insane. "Whose spinal fluid?" I asked. She just laughed and shook her head. "Here, watch this video," she said, pointing to a TV set and a computer chair in the far corner. Near the entrance to the back rooms, I saw teams of men and women clad in full protective suits with the Async logo preparing equipment for transfer into the hallway. To my surprise, they had entire crates filled with grenades, automatic rifles, and bullets. Seeing all that weaponry made my stomach turn. What would someone doing quantum physics research need with crates full of grenades, after all? I sat down and watched as the video started to play. In 1989, in coordination with the ALICE program, our company made a breakthrough that goes far beyond physics research. Using the low-proximity magnetic distortion system, we broke through to A space. But what is A space? A space is the future of humanity. It is a limitless resource that has yet to be explored or tapped. With the exponential growth of the human population and the possibility of a further explosion due to IVF technologies and genetic engineering, our small planet is growing increasingly smaller, and the resources contained within are being rapidly consumed. But what if we could have unlimited space to grow crops, to house an expanding population, to grow the human species to heights undreamed of? Welcome to A space, where the future is now. The movie rambled on for a little while and said a lot of other things that weren't as interesting, though they did mention the 1989 earthquake in San Francisco that had resulted from the low-propensity magnetic distortion system. Then it cut off suddenly. "Well, your debriefing is over," Emily said from directly behind me, making me jump. I turned, seeing her clad in one of those white, protective breathing suits with the Async logo on its back. "Go gear up. We're going to be attempting an entity extraction today." "What is an entity?" I asked, feeling nervous. I glanced at the automatic rifles. I saw Emily had a pistol holstered around her waist and a rifle slung around her shoulder. Grenades and flashbangs covered her belt. "You'll see in a few minutes, won't you?" she asked, grinning. After I suited up and was given my own automatic rifle, magazines, and grenades, I joined the team near the entrance to the back rooms. The person in charge, a tall, pale man with nervous eyes named Frank, put his hands up, motioning the five of us closer. I stayed near Emily, a rising anxiety creeping over my chest. I felt like an astronaut in my protective breathing suit, too. "Okay, I know this is your first day, Alvin," he said, nodding to me through his protective visor, "so there's a couple rules we need to establish. First of all, you must never travel in the back rooms by yourself. Stay in groups of 3 people, and preferably at least 5 people. It is a mandatory regulation that you must always be accompanied by at least 2 other people. Anyone who violates this is subject to immediate termination. You must remain armed at all times while you are within the back rooms. Do not ever lose your weapon. If we issue a retreat order, you must follow it immediately and head towards the exit. Run as fast as you can. Last of all, you must always mark your path with red tape. This will be life-saving if you need to find your way back." He nodded, and we headed through the door. The carpet squished under my booted feet as I stayed in the back of the pack, gripping my rifle nervously. A long piece of red tape went straight down the hallway for thousands of feet. Empty rooms lined both sides of the hallway. The rhythmic humming of the lights felt like a drill in my temples after a few minutes. I gritted my teeth, trying to block it out. Up ahead, the hallway intersected into 8 identical-looking corridors. A piece of red tape turned sharply at a 45-degree angle and opened into a large room with lasers, cameras, and various deadly-looking traps set up all around it. I saw what looked like an enormous bear trap as well as metal panels with long, wicked-looking spikes attached to the ceiling through a system of pulleys and gears. "What are we trying to kill here, Lucifer?" I asked. "What is all this?" Frank gave me a serious look. "Team Bravo is already in a forward position," he said. "They are gaining the attention of the entity as we speak. Be ready for anything." The rest of the team shifted nervously from foot to foot, and even Emily's brash smile was wiped off her face. Our radios came to life all of a sudden with the sound of panicked screaming. "It's here. Coming in now," a woman's ragged voice cried through the radio. "God, help me." I heard a howling from across the chamber, and then a figure in an async suit came sprinting in alone. The woman's face behind the protective visor was a grimace of mortal terror. Spatters of blood covered her suit like raindrops. A wailing cacophony like a tornado siren followed after the woman. Loping after the woman, I saw a creature from an acid fiend's nightmare. Its long, spidery limbs were inhumanly thin and twisted. It held them stiffly in front of its body as it loped forward. Its legs looked like little more than shining obsidian spikes, like the legs of some enormous praying mantis. They pounded the ground at an impossible speed. Its suppurating soar of a mouth split its monstrous, reptilian visage into two. It had no eyes or nose on its face. To my horror, though, I saw eyes on its black, spiky hands. Each of its palms had a blood-red eye that rolled and danced in their sockets. The creature saw its way forward with its hands, gaining on the woman with every step. "Holy shit!" I screamed, backing up instinctively. I was not prepared for this. The creature's shrieking continued unabated, as if it didn't need to ever breathe. Perhaps it didn't. I turned to run, but a hand gripped my arm hard, pulling me back to reality. I glanced over, seeing Emily's wide, dark eyes. "Don't," she whispered as a scream tore through the chamber. The creature had caught up with the woman. At the same time, Frank pressed a button on a remote control he held in his hand. One of the traps on the ceiling released with a sudden cacophony of whirring cables. It fell like a guillotine blade, smashing the creature under its enormous weight. As the entity collapsed under the trap, it struck out with its dagger-like fingers at the woman. With a wet, crunching sound, the woman's chest exploded, a blossoming flower of blood spurting from the front of her torso. The creature's long arm had gone through her entire body. The crimson eye in its palm rolled faster as the fingers clenched and unclenched. Fresh rivulets of blood dripped off its shiny, chitinous exterior. The creature's wailing intensified and grew higher and more dissonant as it writhed under the metal trap, laying on the ground with its arm still stuck in the dying woman's chest. It reminded me of a dying spider laying on its back, its limbs twitching and jumping. The woman coughed, a wet, bubbling sound. Blood exploded from her mouth and covered her protective visor so that it totally obscured her face under the spatter of gore. She stumbled and fell, the creature's arm still inside her, its fists still clenching and unclenching over that single horrid eye. "It's down!" Frank screamed in surprise and excitement. "We got it! Holy shit! Get the trap! Get the trap!" The team scrambled in a burst of sudden energy, ignoring the dead woman in their midst. The creature continued twitching like a stinging hornet, seizing and contorting its stiff limbs to try to force its way out of the steel teeth of the trap. Thick blood the color of soot dribbled down its skin. I followed nervously behind Emily, resisting the urge to simply put the rifle to the creature's head and pull the trigger. "Why do we need to keep this thing alive?" I asked, looking over at her. She frowned. "Well, we don't need to exactly, but whenever we can take one alive, we try to. All of the entities have a single hive mind here. They're all connected somehow telepathically, like some sort of alien ant colony. The team back Earthside wants to study them and find out if they can somehow tap into that and keep the others from attacking us." I frowned. "That sounds totally insane," I responded, glancing at the writhing mass of limbs and black, oily skin on the floor. Frank and two other team members started rolling an enormous metal box over to the entity when its wailing suddenly cut out. It looked up at me with a grin like a skull spread across its obsidian flesh. Then many things happened very quickly. The floor in the room started dropping out in large square sections beneath our feet. Frank's team members gave a scream of surprise as they disappeared, their shrieking fading over a few seconds. Frank still stood next to the metal box, but the room had turned into a maze of carpet winding through drop-offs into a seemingly eternal abyss. "Retreat," Frank called as he raised his rifle, aiming at the entity's head. The floor suddenly fell out from beneath the entity. It fell, its black twisting body disappearing from view into the shadows beneath our feet. "Shit, shit, shit," he repeated it like a mantra as he threaded his way through the narrow paths of carpet still remaining in the massive chamber. As we sprinted out of the room, I looked around, realizing only Emily, Frank, and I still remained alive. "Back to the door," Frank screamed in panic. "Follow the tape. We need to get out of the back rooms immediately." He took the lead, pounding the wet carpet hard. I wasn't used to running like this and quickly grew lightheaded and exhausted. We came to an intersection up ahead that I didn't remember on our way here. The red tape suddenly split into all four directions. We stopped, a rising sense of terror and panic filling the group consciousness as we glanced down each of the hallways. They all looked exactly the same, fading off into the distance thousands of feet away. "What the fuck?" Emily said, now visibly sweating. I had never seen her this nervous and uncertain. "What do we do now, Frank?" Frank just shook his head, pulling his radio up to his visor. He kept checking his back, his finger always on the trigger of the rifle, ready to start firing the moment he saw anything peeking around corners or loping down the endless hallways after him. "This is Team Alpha," he said. "Team Alpha, we need assistance. We have casualties back near the containment room. The entity has escaped, and," he gulped nervously, "we have 4 hallways and the red tape goes down all of them. Something is messing with us right now. We need a team to come in and show us the right way back to the door. Over." Frank waited for a few seconds. A nervous, high-pitched voice came over the speaker. Yeah, Frank. We have some problems of our own right now," the man said brusquely. "We'll get you out as soon as possible. Just hold tight. Secure your position at the intersection and wait for orders." Over. Frank shook his head angrily. "Fuck, we are so screwed," he whispered. Emily was looking behind me. She jumped, her eyes widening. I glanced behind me, seeing a door slowly opening. A low creaking echoed through the hallway, mixing with the incessant buzzing of the lights. A face peeked around the corner, eyeless and reptilian, its head pointed. Its deep slash of a mouth was formed into a wide, Cheshire cat grin. Slowly, it pulled back into the room, as if it wanted us to see it. It felt like it was toying with us, like a cat stalking a mouse before ripping its head off. My heart was hammering a staccato drum beat in my eardrums. My quick breathing echoed through the suit. I felt alone, like a scuba diver at the bottom of the ocean surrounded by unknown deep-sea monstrosities. "It's watching us," Emily whispered grimly, nodding to herself. "This is how it always starts. We can't wait here, Frank. We have to go on and find our way back." Frank shook his head, raising the rifle. "We'll kill it," he said, his false bravado not reaching his pale blue eyes. "We cannot get lost in here, Emily. No one who gets lost here ever finds their way out. You know that. If you want to wait here and die, be my guest," she hissed through gritted teeth, turning to leave. She looked back at me. "Are you staying, or coming with me?" I looked between her and Frank. From another hallway, I saw the glint of a bleached white face with black sockets for eyes peering at us. "Oh God," I said, grabbing at my head. I gave Frank one last backwards glance before jogging to catch up with Emily. He stood alone, gripping his rifle tightly as if it were a holy sacrament used to drive away demons. His twitching, strained face had turned beet red with anger. "I'll have you both fired for this," he screamed after us. "You're going to die, you idiots. You need to wait for the extraction team." His yelling grew fainter as we walked away down the hall. After a few moments, it was joined by another sound, an almost mechanical wailing, the predatory crying of the entity. Gunshots exploded behind us. I looked back and saw Frank, a tiny dot in the distance. A black blur ran into him like a freight train smashing into a car. The gunshots cut off instantly, and then everything went silent. The hallway quickly curved, opening into a dark room thousands of feet wide filled with trees and thick brush. Fluorescent lights flickered hundreds of feet overhead. Emily shook her head. "God damn it, I don't recognize any of this," she said. Maybe Frank was right. "Frank is dead," I responded. "And we're going to be soon, too, if we don't find our way back. How does anyone survive in this hellhole?" As in response, a voice came crying from the dark forest up ahead. "Help me," a man shouted. "Is anyone there? Please, God, help me." Emily froze, her hand shooting out to stop me. "What is it?" I whispered. "That guy sounds like he needs help." "No way," she said, backpedaling quickly. "We need to head back. Right now." We started to make our way through the brush back to the hallway, sprinting back toward the intersection as fast as we could. The cries continued to follow us, and I saw something black and alien peeking out of the rooms in the hallways more than once. Then the screaming came from right next to us. A door opened onto a small room filled with traffic signal lights, all flashing and strobing red. The entity stood there, its alien face splitting into a grin with a sound like bones cracking. I immediately opened fire, holding down the trigger on the M4 and emptying the magazine at the thing. It howled in anger, then, in a very human voice, began screaming. "Help me," it shrieked in a man's voice as it ran forward, the bloody eyes on its palms rolling. Emily turned to run, tripping over her own feet. I heard the rifle click as the bullets ran out. With a last look down at Emily, I made a decision to save myself. I ran then, and her panicked, agony-filled screams followed me for what felt like minutes. Then, with a sick, gurgling cry, they cut off. I dared not look back, fearing that I would see another face peeking around the corner at me. I had chosen another random hallway. Panicked, I sprinted blindly ahead, hoping against hope that I would find the way out. A pale white face looked out from the room in front of me. I stopped in my tracks, slamming another magazine into the chamber. With a rush of adrenaline, I pulled a flashbang from my belt and tossed it ahead of me, rolling it slowly into the room. There was a sound like a cannon blast and a flash of blinding light. Hoping against hope, I sprinted past the room. The creature inside had a face like a corpse. Its dark sockets of eyes spun like black holes spinning in the void. Its bone-white skin clung tightly to its bones as it loped forward on all fours, like some sort of rabid wolf child. It had thin, emaciated limbs that reminded me of the victim of a death camp. I sprinted for my life, exhausted beyond all measure. I dared not look back, but as the red tape continued its incessant trail in front of me, I realized that I saw a doorway far off in the distance. Through it, I saw a team of async employees clad in protective suits entering. They began shouting at me, but I couldn't hear what they were saying over the rapid jackhammer drum beat of my heart in my ears. Just as I got within a few hundred feet of them, I felt something hard smash into my back. A burning pain flashed through my body as I went flying forwards, hitting the wall. I fell to the floor, looking up as the pale creature slithered on top of me. At that moment, multiple rifles started firing. The creature's face exploded in a shower of bone splinters and gore. Headless, its slithering, serpentine limbs continued writhing on top of me. Then it fell forward, its bloody stump of a neck spurting all over my protective visor. They dragged the creature off of me. With blood pouring down my back from 4 deep gashes, the extraction team rolled a gurney and took me out of the back rooms. I gave a long sigh of relief. With the wheels of the gurney rolling rhythmically underneath me, I fell into a long, black sleep, and dreamed of carpets soaked in spinal fluid and endless hallways that led somewhere else. My first day in the back rooms was finally over.